This is Fantology.
You may have heard of us.
Welcome back, White Cloaks. This is going to be another episode deconstructing some of the common criticisms we've seen of the Wheel of Time on Prime TV show. My name's Jake, and from Fantology, I have Josh here. How you doing, Josh?
Pretty good. If we seem a little rusty, it's because we don't have our stalwart, steady hand, Steven, guiding us through this episode. We're just going to have to try and do it by ourselves.
Yeah, he's been our fearless leader in getting this these episodes going. Speaking of, this is kind of part of a series, deconstructing some of these criticisms, ranging from plot holes to is the show pushing a too woke agenda to changes from the book, which we'll be addressing here. But Stephen made a good introduction video to the series, and we might be continue it, but watch his introduction video to try to get a sense for what our goal here really is. We're not trying to, attack anybody or start any fights. We're really trying to look at these arguments we've seen that seem to be a little more drastic, and really break them down and see why are they or why are they not valid, and kind of look at it from all angles. So we'll be watching some clips from the Night's Watch YouTube channel. It's one of Shad from Shadiversity's side channels where he and some friends kind of review episode by episode Wheel of Time. Do you have anything else, Josh?
We're using this video, these reviews from Night's Watch as kind of a framing device to deconstruct a lot of criticisms that we see on like our White Cloaks, and so we're not saying that like these are all the criticisms or these are the only like valid criticisms. We're also not trying to cherry pick easily debunkable criticisms.
Yeah.
We're doing our best to provide context, and the content we're going through is like 5 hours long between the two episodes that we really chose to hone in on. And so, we're going to share a few minutes of clips here or there. We're really trying our best to provide like enough context that we're not trying to like create a straw man argument or, take them out of context. If you want more context, go watch the video, but we can't just replay, 3 hours.
Yeah. So we're just going to show clips, but watch the whole thing if you want to make sure, we're not misconstruing anything. And like we're saying, we're not trying to like say, wow, these guys are dumb for having this opinion. No, people have different opinions. We're just going to try to break down, the validity of those opinions according to our own
opinion. But
worldview. Yeah.
I will say one thing they claim in this, and I don't know if we have a clip for this or not, but Shad multiple times claims that if you like this adaptation, then you can't be as big of a fan as he is, because the adaptation is showing quote unquote contempt for the source material. And so if you like that, then it must be because you also have some sort of contempt for the source material.
Yeah, let's people have different opinions on a wide variety of things. You can love the books more than anyone else, but not really care if a TV show matches it. That doesn't mean you don't love the books more or less than someone else. All it means is your mind views those as two separate things and they don't interfere with each other. You have a wide range of that.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that with some of the way that Brandon Sanderson has talked about this. We also have a mutual friend who is the one that really pushed me to read Wheel of Time. He's been a lifelong friend of mine, and he loves the books probably more than anyone I know. And he has, things that he doesn't like about the adaptation, but he also has things that he likes about the adaptation. And so like there's
it's interesting.
A lot of ways to view this, right?
There's things that like he and I'm like, this really bothered me about the show, and he's like, oh, I didn't care about that. And there's things he's like, this really bothered me about the show, and I'm like, oh, I don't care about that. And we both love the books, but obviously different things stand out to different people. Anyways, this was just so you can know opinions are different, but we're gonna get in to watch this clip real quick and then discuss. So
give me the most clear point of reference of quality. of like the books are great, and so therefore if you change anything, I can gauge what you did versus the books to see what's better.
Yeah.
Okay. And nearly in every instance, and I've even pointed out one where I thought it was actually a slight improvement, but so far on everything else, nearly every change has been worse, drastically so. And episode 4, you might say, you know, there were so many changes. Episode 4 was actually quite accurate to a lot of, you know, things that happened.
So yeah, his point was, the books are the ultimate, you know, litmus test. Is it better than the books and you're doing a good job? If you're not meeting the books, then you're doing a poor job. What do you think about that, Josh?
Well, I think that's missing the point of what an adaptation is. Like, yeah, I think that in general, I like it when adaptations try and stick to the source material. But there's times when that can't happen, and there's times when there's adaptations are better than the books, and there's times when they're worse.
And I think that's what he's saying though, right? Like, he's disappointed when he views something as worse than the books, because he's like, if you didn't know how to do it, just do it the way the books do it at least, because that's like the default line, or do it better, you know?
Right. And I don't think that there's anything in and of itself that's wrong with that opinion. But also, like, I don't feel like they're giving the show a fair shake, and we haven't finished even the first season yet. Like, yes, episodes really like should be able to stand on their own, but that would be like taking, you know, reading up to like halfway through The Eye of the World and being like, this book is the most boring book I've ever read, and it's just a trope of Lord of the Rings, and it's so bad, blah blah blah, which a lot of people do, and I know it really triggers a lot of Wheel of Time fans. And like, you're kind of doing the same thing here. So
yeah, I'm kind of torn on this. I see that point. Like, we don't see the whole picture yet, but I think there are valid criticisms and the changes that have been made from the books where it's pretty apparent. It's not like those are going to be fixed in the next few episodes or even in the next few seasons. It's like, that's what it is. And if you think those changes are worse, then that's the way it lands. So I think it's fair to say, I think it's fair to be like disappointed that, you know, the books are right here and you're adapting things to right here. Why aren't you just doing better? My pushback against that sentiment would be, what is better or worse is so subjective that I'm sure what Rafe and the team are trying to do is make things as good as the books or better. I'm sure they're like, that's their main goal. There are times where I bet they're like, you know, we just can't do this. This isn't going to work. So we're going to have to change it. And the change is going to be slightly worse or maybe a lot worse. But we have to, you know, there's other constraints going. I guess to finish out my thought here is, it's an adaptation. Things are going to have to change. And from what I've seen, there are many changes I'm not a fan of. There are many things that happen in the series that I don't really like, but you can tell that a lot of thought and effort has been put into the series. And we kind of talked about this in our earlier segment, but to me, I don't see any agenda other than people really loving the Wheel of Time and trying to make the best adaptation they can with the resources they have, with the constraints they have. And so I think it's 100% valid to be disappointed in things. I think it's 100% valid if you hate the show, totally fine. But you have to understand that it cannot be a one-to-one adaptation of the books.
Yeah. And I agree. I think that for one, you have a much longer history with the Wheel of Time than I do. Right. And so I think that there is more disappointment that's going to come from not seeing this. I mean, granted, I started reading the books 12 years ago, so I have a pretty long history too, but they weren't as fundamental in shaping me as they were with you. And I think that I agree with you that there are things that I have been disappointed in, and it is totally, you know, valid to hate the show. But what I don't think is valid, and what I see a lot of, is, like you said, people like claiming that Rafe is doing this just to push his agenda, that he has contempt for the source material, and that the only reason he's making these changes is because he has contempt for the book, or he thinks that he can do it better. Like, there's a change from an adaptation is not just thinking that you can do it better. It's thinking that this might work better for the adaptation, right? Like the change of having Perrin kill his wife, and they didn't really talk about this, so I'm not going to be using what they said, but like the change of having Perrin killing his wife versus killing a White Cloak, that is a change. And you can, like, a bad faith argument, I think, is to say, oh, well, they just thought that they were doing it better. I think that you can say that it didn't work as well for you, or you don't like the change, or like Brandon Sanderson said that would deal too much trauma to Perrin. Like, all of these are very valid criticisms, but you have to go back to, like, they were trying to make an adaptation. And my wife, who's never read the books, like, that drew her in, and seeing, and she said multiple times that like made her really care about Perrin and how he was going to deal with that. And like, it wasn't, so they put effort into a lot of these changes. And that's a change that's not like a constraint. That's a change that they didn't need to do by a constraint from like a budget or what. It was more of a storytelling choice. And I don't think that you have to just jump to assume that contempt was the reason that they made a change. It might have been because they were trying to make a good adaptation.
Yeah, you kind of have to give people the benefit of the doubt. We don't know. Like, I think if there weren't any fan interactions with the Wheel of Time production, if it was just like you heard the Wheel of Time was being adapted, nothing else until the show came out, and then you watched it and you saw this, I think it'd be valid to say like, oh, these changes were made probably because Amazon's just trying to make money. That's why that is the whole reason Amazon is putting out the Wheel of Time, to make money.
There is an agenda here. It's to make Amazon money, right?
Yeah.
Like, we can, and they're paying us for this review. So,
Oh yeah. So, I mean, I think it's fair to have that mentality if that were the case, but that wasn't. Like, we got so much interaction with Rafe, with all the production team. Is it Sarah Nakamura, who is they hired a Wheel of Time book expert to like bounce ideas off of, to say like, hey, if this happened, what are the ramifications here? And she like writes essays back to them saying, this is what this one change will do. And then they have to like kind of grapple with that and be like, okay, can we still make this change? Can we not? If we can't, like, what do we need to do? So, I mean, it's just been so apparent to me, if you've been following the whole production, that so much like love has been poured into this. Like, you hear about Rafe. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, just let alone having Harriet, who is Robert Jordan's wife and editor, involved, and having Brandon Sanderson give feedback on the scripts, and not making it and allowing him to come on. He did. We're going to get into this interview with Dan Wells that he did, but he's allowed to badmouth the show, and he has like posted on Reddit the feedback that he gave to Rafe, and he has said things that he doesn't like about the show. Like, so no, Sanderson's not under like a I don't want to say he's not under an NDA, because there are probably aspects that
he said
he's allowed to critique the show.
He's not under a non-disparaging agreement. Yeah. So he's open. Anyways, well, we'll get into that a little later on. But my point was, like, if you remember Rafe talking about when he first started reading the Wheel of Time, and how much it meant to him and helped like his childhood and his relationship with his mom. Like, this is someone who is like loved this work of art. So anyways, should we watch the next clip?
Well, I want to talk about something that I don't think we have on the notes. But I think it's a potential change that a lot of people seem very concerned about. And this isn't even a change.
There's this talk between Moraine and Swan, and oh man, they're setting something up. There've been so many prophecies. I even heard from a Gleeman that it could be a many-headed dragon.
Oh, man or woman, many-headed.
And so, oh no,
they're gonna do it a woman.
I think they're gonna do it. This is the thing. I didn't think, I felt change the dragon would be too far, and I agree with that. But now, I think they can justify it by, they're not going to change the dragon, they're going to make them all the dragon. Which is essentially changing it, but it's like they're trying to justify, we haven't really changed it. The original dragon is still the dragon, but they're all the dragon.
They're all the dragon, yeah.
My question is, I said back in episode 1 that they'd make a woman the dragon. I said over and over again they'd do it.
Yeah.
Would I technically still be right if all of them are?
See, it depends on context. Okay, were you meaning that it would be solely a woman and no one else? I think that's what you're meaning,
That
and I
was what
still
was
think that's
meaning.
wrong. Yeah.
But still, the fact that they'd make it a woman, even though it's only meant to be a dude.
But because again, I think, but this I wouldn't put it past them, and they are setting it up. These are lines in the show, and then even Swan says, "Would the wheel split the dragon's soul into many?" And oh boy, this is bad, because that's a line from Swan that is setting up the law in this show that a soul of an individual can be split into multiple people. And she says it without, that's impossible, it can't happen. She says it in the context that this could be something the wheel could do.
Yeah.
That's the Chekhov's gun. Holy crap.
If we can have female dragon, can we have male
crap.
Aes Sedai?
No.
Can we have male ambulance seat?
If they are going to make the dragon multiple people, they have contempt for the book. They like, that is such a massive change, and it's wholly political. Why? It's literally, they think it's problematic for a cis white male to be the hero.
Yep.
It has to, and oh no, women playing second fiddle, they have to win. They're such bigots. They really are. And they have a bias against like traditional masculinity and also traditional relationships, because they're pushing the agenda and they're changing characters, you know. And it's just all on display. They are pissing on the Wheel of Time's legacy with this. Like, it really are.
Are they calling it rain?
Ah, my goodness. And look, that's the setup. I'm not sure I could deny it. I think that's really where they're going to go now.
Okay, so let's just debunk that a little bit. First, I want to read off a quote from Rafe. So one, I don't know if they're aware of this quote, but they're pulling tweets, you know, and Night's Watch and people on White Cloak are pulling quotes from, 3 years ago, tweets that Rafe sent and using it as evidence. So I think it's fine to use an interview he gave a few months ago as evidence. Okay, so Rafe says, this is in an interview with Deadline. He says, "One thing we're trying to hide from the audience is who the Dragon Reborn is. That is a change from the book. It's not really hidden much from the audience.
That's a
the
better
Dragon Reborn
change.
is."
I think everyone would agree that's a better change.
Well, okay, but regardless if you do or don't, like, that is a change from the book. So that is a change. He said, "People who have read the books will know, of course, the first book is told from the Dragon Reborn's perspective, but the whole book series is an ensemble piece." So he came out and said in this interview, not like super explicitly, but he said, people who have read the book will know who the Dragon Reborn is. Yeah. So let's put to bed all of this, like, this pearl clutching.
This could go in like the woke agenda episode almost.
Yeah, it can go in the woke agenda episode, but there's like this so much pearl clutching of the fact that they are leading up to changing who the Dragon Reborn is. And there's like that conversation between Swan and Moraine, and she's like, "Oh, it could be a many-headed dragon, or it could be a man, or it could be a woman." Like, yeah, some of these are minor changes from the book lore. I'm not saying that they're not, but like, and Shad straight up says that this is Chekhov's gun. Like, they wouldn't just be saying that. And no, that's called a red herring. Like, yeah, there are red herrings in literature and media in misdirection. We are getting the same dragon as is from the books, according to this quote from Ray. And if they change it and I have to eat these words, fine, but we're getting told from Ray.
And again, yeah, I think, I don't know if they just weren't aware of a lot of this production stuff.
Being charitable to them, maybe they weren't aware of that quote.
But it shows that their fears are unfounded.
It shows that, that their fears are unfounded. And frankly, like, again, if you are putting these critiques out to, like, they have thousands of subs and thousands of views on their YouTube videos, like, I'm not saying that you can't get a fact wrong, but I'm saying if this is like a main part of your argument, like, yeah, maybe do a little research. Like, this is not a hard article to find. And all right, you're pulling out tweets from 3 years ago about the production. So, yeah.
What? Okay, I'm not sure what tweets you're talking about, but let's move on to the next part, because I think we spent enough time on that.
That's an important point. Like, there are so many people saying, "Oh, they're obviously going to change who the dragon is." No, they're not, guys. Like, they're not.
Okay. All right. We're trying to deconstruct the arguments here. and just that. All right. So this is going to be talking about, I think that we'll just watch the clip and discuss afterwards.
This is a new one, and but so they could have had great things from the book that they cut, not because they had lacked time, but now because they wanted to put in their own bullcrap, right? And this is where, when I talk about signs of the writers, the showrunner, whatever, showing contempt for the original material, where they cut something that didn't need to be cut, and their choice to change it made it objectively worse, which is a sign of the creators thinking they know better. The show was the books were imperfect. We can improve it. Let's make the books better by making arbitrary, subjective changes to our own tastes and agenda, which we will get to, to improve it. No, this is a mask-off moment for the creators about pushing really specific, their view of the world, what's correct, what's right, and all that stuff, and injecting it into a classic great story because they think they know better, they can do better, and these are problematic elements in the book that needs to be fixed. Screw you! Like, seriously! So they literally have cut things for the purpose of changing it to interject their own stories and interpretations on the show. That literally takes over half an episode because they know better, and they're just pleasuring themselves watching this episode, thinking they're so great.
Yeah, and Shad, this is what I'll be charitable with this. I'll try to be like center ground. This is what I was talking about with the whole woke viewpoint, is that all the things you like, they're problematic. They need...
All right. Was that done?
Yeah, sure.
Where's it supposed to go to?
You said 26, 28, so.
Okay, pass it. Okay.
Probably
I just realized that I'm sharing my screen and you can see I've disliked this video. That's why I started laughing in the middle of it. And to be fair, I did dislike this video. And the reason I did, I just really don't want people to think that we're like trying to like pick a fight or like ad hominem anything. I just liked the video because I thought 99% of the claims made were just bogus, and they weren't well supported, as you can tell from our this whole series we're doing.
Apparently that's how Rafe gets off this, by watching his episode. Okay.
But all right, so this is basically, I think they're mainly talking about like removing Camelin, inserting Tarvalon, and having this whole episode mainly focused around Steppen. We already kind of talked about the woke agenda part they talked about. But so this change from Camelin to Tarvalon, the claim is this was done because they have contempt for the source material, thought we can make this better, so that we're going to make a change.
Okay, so let's stay on Camelin for a little bit, because that's what he said. That's what he implied that they should have done. First of all, anybody who's been remotely following the show knows that Camelin was cut for a few reasons, and they bring this up later, which kind of annoys me, because they show that they're aware of this later on. I don't know if it's in this episode, the review of episode 6, but Camelin was cut for two main reasons. One is because of budget. Building Camelin is going to be expensive if they do it right. And yeah, they make the point later on that, like, even if it looks bad, you would rather have it stick to the source material. I mean, obviously that's just a creative difference that like they have, obviously they want the show to look really good. And so they felt like they didn't have the budget. This is, the kind of doing an adaptation.
I think the main things with Camelin is sets was a big expense. I heard about that, and then also casting. The main players in Camelin that you would meet in Camelin in book 1 don't really have a big role until later on, and what would be towards the middle or end of season 2, and even extended. And Rafe had talked about how it's hard to get good casting for someone who's going to have a cameo in the beginning and then later become more important. Like it's easier to find someone who's important for a long segment and then is gone, and then maybe has a cameo later, than it is to get people to commit to this long thing. And so I think that's a combination of budgetary constraints and casting, which is again a part of budgetary constraints.
Yeah, and to be fair, he does address these things later on. I don't know if it's in this episode or the next, but he said he would rather have them, maybe get a different actor or make the sets look cheap and have it stick to the story. And you can have that opinion. I'm not saying that's wrong.
Yeah.
But that's not what they chose to do, and I don't think that them choosing not to do that is showing contempt for the source material. I think it's them having to make really hard decisions about how to adapt the story. And
for me, it seems pretty clear that it was a change of due to restraints or constraints rather than a change of
contempt. That's like the least.
Well, definitely. I mean, a change of contempt. There's no way we could prove or disprove that, but a change in terms of, okay, this isn't that good. We need to make it better. Let's make this change. It didn't come off that way at all. Like when I look at the facts here, it seems like it's much more, we have this constraint, we need to make a change. And then once that change was made, how can we move on from here and in the best way possible? So we also have a note here about Steppen adds this emotional beat to the story. Did you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So I think a more valid criticism and something that I think a lot of mainstream Wheel of Time reviewers have talked about is this choice to add Steppen to the story. I think this one is rightfully a little bit more controversial because cutting Camelin is one thing, but they could have filled that time, more centered on Perrin and Egwene or Matt and Rand, or given, more opportunities for other characters to have some time to grow. And that's not what they decided to do. And so I think that there is more validity into them thinking that they could do this better. I think that's a very let me say, I think that this is a very uncharitable reading of this change, but I think that there's more evidence than like cutting Camelin. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Obviously, they made it like there's a change in screen time and adding this Steppen thing, and I don't know. I just don't think you can prove or disprove whether like the reasons why they did in terms of contempt or because they thought they knew better, like this hubris or anything. They're trying to make a good show. A lot of people like that episode. I personally found it to be one of the weaker ones for a lot of the points that were made by Night's Watch of.
This, in my opinion, is the most valid point they make in any of the ones in the series we've talked about.
But I mean, I guess I don't need to get into it, but that's just an opinion, that like a like or preference when it comes down to that. I don't think there's any facts to show that this change from the book was due to contempt. We are kind of running out of time. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, let me just say that again, my wife, that's not a reader, really liked this episode. And I think that they did need an emotional beat in the story. I think that up to this point in the story, there hadn't been a lot of really, really human emotions shown. And I think that, there are other parts of the Eye of the World that they could have pulled that from. And I kind of wish they would have, but they didn't. And I don't think anyway, let's move on. And
so this next part talks about how Night's Watch believes that Brandon Sanderson is dissatisfied with the adaptation we have currently of the Wheel of Time TV show.
Well, I would try and find a way to voice certain things. And one of the things that, for me, explains a lot, again, this is me reading into it, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but Brandon has been very, very clear that this is another turning of the wheel. It's not the original Wheel of Time. And for me, that's actually a far more severe condemnation on the show than people realize. Brandon, as a fan of the books, cannot compare it to the books. Okay, he is trying to consider this as divorced from the source material as possible and only judge it on that. And he has said nothing, literally nothing, in regards to how he feels about this show as a fan, right? Like comparing it to the books. In my opinion, that says a lot.
That's very telling.
Okay.
So they make a few points. They basically say, and Shad knows Brandon Sanderson, I think, relatively well. He's credited in some of Sanderson's works as, and so I think that they know each other relatively well. For sure, more than we know Sanderson from taking his lectures or whatever. Not that we know Sanderson, but he claims, and something that I think that we have seen from the interactions, is that Sanderson is a very genuinely very, very nice person. You know, he will take the time to like make people feel comfortable. And so they kind of use this very valid character trait that Sanderson has as being like maybe overly charitable and very just nice, and says, well, that's the only reason why he's not coming out and really critiquing the show, is because he's friends with Rafe, and he's just such a nice guy that he's not going to say what he really thinks.
Yeah, and we can show this clip from Brandon Sanderson where he has said about the adaptation so far.
Interestingly, my contract does not have non-disparagement. I am allowed to say whatever I want about the show in any way.
That is interesting.
I generally like to respect what people are doing, and I happen to really like what they're doing with the Wheel of Time. But I am allowed to say I hate it if I do.
If you do.
In fact, I warned Rafe ahead of time. I'm like, if you bring me on, this is one of the things. I will need to be able to tell it straight to the Wheel of Time fans. He said, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I guess going back to what you said about Night's Watch saying that Brandon Sanderson is too nice to give a full critique. I don't really think that's the case. He's been posting reviews of each episode on Reddit, his like little, not really reviews, but more like a behind the scenes breakdown and his thoughts on it. And he like readily calls out what he doesn't like about the adaptation. He calls out what he does like. And I don't know him, and maybe Shad like knows him well enough to know this, but especially after watching a lot of Sanderson's podcast episodes, he's really good at critiquing things that he, like whenever they go over the movies they do or do not like.
Sanderson has a lot of interesting media.
Yeah, I don't agree with a lot of his takes there, but I'm just saying, like, I've seen him be critical, and it doesn't seem like this at all. He's pretty open with things that he isn't a fan of. But he also does, I will agree, it does seem like he sees, the world in a little more positive lens here. But also, like, I don't know, it's hard to balance all this. But my main takeaway would be, you can't put words in someone's mouth. You have like, all you can do is
use it as evidence to like bolster your claims.
Yeah, especially
like, come on.
But you can't put words in his mouth. Brandon has said what he has said about the Wheel of Time, and that's all we can go off of. If you want to use him to support your opinions one way or the other, use what he has said. Like you have record of it. Brandon has called it, another turning of the Wheel of Time, which I really liked that I heard that at the beginning of production, because that really framed it in a way to help me accept more changes. But I think it's a brilliant move because it works like with canon and the show, like history repeats itself every cycle, like every full turn of the wheel. And it's like the same, but it's different. And anyways, it's another turning of the wheel. You can think of it that way. You can think of it as a portal stone world, like a mirror world, You can't say that him calling it that means he secretly hates it, or, you don't read between the lines when someone is like posting what their thoughts on something. You just, you accept what they say, Yeah.
and that's really the thing here is like, you can, he makes the point that he knows that Sanderson can see these like flagrant, contemptuous things that happen in the show, and he knows that Sanderson is talented enough to see that. So how could he not like it? Like, that just shows to me that there's a lack of seeing other people's viewpoints as valid, right? Like,
yeah. And I think it's pretty evident that Shad and Brandon Sanderson have pretty different worldviews on a lot of things. And so it makes sense that their like assessment of media and like adaptations here it's going to be different. Like people have different opinions,
Wait, Jake, people have different opinions on stuff?
Yeah, I don't. This episode is kind of meandering. What we're trying to do is effectively look at their claims about are these changes from the book valid criticisms of the TV show? I think for a lot of it, I think it can be, because this is really subjective. I think you can see any change from the book and feel disappointed by it. I think that's totally valid. And Brandon Sanderson says that himself, you know, like he says he liked the Wheel of Time, but like everyone should be allowed to dislike it if they dislike it, you know?
Yeah.
That is a very valid thing. Like, you don't have to like it. Just because you're a fan of the books doesn't mean you have to be a fan of the show. Just because you are a fan of the show doesn't mean you have to be a fan of the books, you know?
I think that where you get into a little bit of murkiness is when you start putting forth reasons for these changes outside of story reasons and into agenda driven things. And I know that I know that we're going to get called out, because Rafe has said that, like, you know, he wants to make it more progressive and he wants to put feminist things in there. And I think he has a joke about, like, if people hate what you're doing, then you just make their favorite characters gay. Like that's a
I haven't heard that joke.
Yeah, I think you sent that tweet, and I'm pretty
That's
sure he was
pretty
joking
funny.
about that, because all of the gay characters that have been in the Wheel of Time are also gay in the books. Or, you know,
That's funny.
and so like, yeah, again, this has been a little bit more meandering because a lot of this is subjective, but you wouldn't get that. That's not what Night's Watch says. Like that by us saying that, that's like really that's us flagrantly disagreeing with a lot of what Night's Watch says, because they say that a lot of these changes, they are fundamentally in like for sure changes that make it worse and show contempt. And I think that's just a fundamental misunderstanding of.
Yeah, that's definitely, and that, we've covered a lot of the changes already previously, but I think that covers most of what we had noted out here for this this first part. We may continue this series as more critiques come out, but let us know what you guys think. Like, how did you think our takes compared to the clips we shared from Night's Watch and Brandon Sanderson? And like we've said before, if you have negative comments, please post them all on our YouTube channel on this episode on our YouTube, because YouTube loves it, you know. If you want to have a civil discussion, come over to Discord. You know, we love to discuss, and we love the fact that we have this new iteration of the Wheel of Time. We still have the books. We have this new one, and we can have a difference of opinion. So,
all right. Thanks, Jake.
All right. Well, like and subscribe, do all that stuff. Check us out on Discord, and we'll see you guys later.